Your Honor, thank you. Ms. Cardwell, so you indicated that Mia made this kind of a self-admission that she would be testing dirty as well. I mean, what was the context of that conversation? I mean, how did that come up, and what follow-up did you do with whatever she said to you?
When I went on April 1st to let them know that all the children will have to be hair follicle, Mia let me know that she will be positive for marijuana because she smoked every day. She told me that she wasn't sure if it will show for Molly or cocaine as well because she was experimenting, but she doesn't do those drugs specifically on a regular basis. She told me that she wanted to tell me because she didn't want the results affecting her mom. She did say that her mom did not know that she tried Molly and cocaine, but her mom knows that she smokes marijuana, but will not allow it in the house. That was our conversation.
So your understanding was Mia was engaging in these activities essentially behind her mother's back?
For Molly and cocaine, yes.
Okay. All right. At the time, was Mia living in the home with the other kiddos?
Yes.
Okay.
She was going back and forth as well with her boyfriend and her mother.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Ms. McCormick, I don't think you have a dog in this hunt, do you?
Not really, but
Okay.
I'll hang around.
Mr. Hardy, I don't think you have
Yes,
a dog in this hunt, do you?
I have just two questions.
Go ahead.
So the concerns the department had for FBSS, those were only related to Miss Charte, not to Mr. Rushford. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, finish your answer.
I was just going to say, we just sent him for a test to confirm that he wasn't drinking, which he wasn't.
Okay. And no other services besides that for Mr. Rushford?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Smith, any questions for Ms. Cardwell?
Yes, Judge, just briefly. Ms. Cardwell, I represent Lennox and Memphis. And just real quickly, when Ms. Charte was on her run with her friend, the meth run, and while she was out picking up what she claims was Vyvanse, but was actually methamphetamines, did she indicate who was taking care of the children?
So those are two different situations, but as far as why we got involved in when she was pulled over, it's my understanding that Mia was taking care of the children while she was transporting the friend to get meth.
Okay, and did she indicate where the children were when she was picking up Vyvanse or meth?
For the day when we got involved for that initial intake, she told Mia that she was going to Walmart and asked her to stay and watch the kids. Mia stayed at the home with the children until the police arrived and maternal grandmother came and picked them up.
Okay, and is it fair to say that Mia was frequently the children's babysitter?
Yes.
And Mia has admitted that she frequently smoked marijuana with the consent of her mother or with the knowledge of her mother.
Yes, and Mr. Charte admitted that as well.
Okay, and from time to time engaged also in Molly and cocaine use?
Yes.
Okay. And fair to say that those are times that she would have been around the younger kids as well.
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
Okay. And did Ms. Charte, did you confront Mr. Charte with the drug test results for the children?
Yes.
And what was her explanation as to why, well, all three children would have tested positive for meth and or amphetamines?
She told me that she believes it was her boyfriend because her boyfriend would do meth in the house. And so she Googled that residue can be left around and that the kids could pick it up off the counter or anything. That was her explanation to me.
So she admitted that she had someone around the house whom she knew was engaged in methamphetamine use around her children.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Mr. Baker, do you have any questions for Ms. Cardwell?
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Cardwell. Oh, oops, Mr. Kuklinski, you got
I'm
something
sorry.
else? Go
Yes, Miss Cardwell, what is the name of this boyfriend?
I'm not sure.
Did you ask?
I heard about him that same day. And to be honest, I don't remember. That was the only time we ever talked about a boyfriend.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you, Judge.
Anyone else have anything else for Ms. Cardwell? Okay, thank you, Ms. Cardwell. Ms. House, who's going to be your next witness?
Cecilia Ramirez. Okay. And Ms. Ramirez, how are you employed?
I am an investigator with the Department of Family and Protective Services.
And when did you get involved with a case involving Marissa Asharte and the children Mia, Knox, and Lennox and Memphis?
I became involved on January 24th, 2022.
Okay. And how did you become involved with this family?
We received a report for neglectful supervision of all 4 children by Marissa Asharte on that day.
Okay. And when you got that, what were the concerns that you were investigating?
It was reported that Marissa had been stopped for a traffic stop and that methamphetamine and paraphernalia was found in the vehicle, and that the children were at the home alone. And mom had said that the drugs had belonged to Mia.
Okay. So you're investigating drugs. And
Yes.
what is the first step in your investigation when you get this?
The first step is I would contact the reporter.
Okay. And did you receive a phone call from David Rushford in this case?
I did.
And who is that?
That is father to Memphis and Lennox.
Okay. And did he report to you anything about these allegations against Miss Asharte?
Yes, he had called me and he had told me that he had heard that Marissa had been arrested and that he had wanted his children.
Okay. Did he indicate to you that he had spoken with Miss Asharte about this incident?
Yes, he did.
And what was that report from Mr. Rushford?
He had told me that Marissa had called him from jail and that she had been arrested leaving a trap house.
Okay. Did he talk to you about her, Miss Asharte's appearance?
Yes, he told me that she had looked deteriorated lately.
Okay. Did Mr. Rushford indicate any knowledge or what his knowledge was of Miss Asharte's drug use?
Yes, he said he didn't know if she was using methamphetamines, but he wouldn't be surprised by it if she was using.
Did you meet with Miss Asharte around the time of January 24th, 2022?
Yes, I met with her on January 26th.
And can you tell me about that contact with Miss Asharte?
Yes, I went to her home. Initially, she was not really inviting into the home. She wasn't really cooperative, I would say. How would I describe her? I would describe her as maybe erratic. She didn't want to cooperate with me, and didn't understand the reason why I was there. Didn't feel there was any need for me to be involved. She felt her kids were safe and felt that it was irrelevant for me to be there.
You said she was erratic. What do you mean by that?
That visit became loud. I had to raise my voice multiple times because at one point when several family members, once they all got there, it just became heated arguments between several family members once everybody was there.
Okay. Was Miss Asharte participating in these arguments?
Yes.
Right. Was her behavior erratic, or was it just everyone's behavior was erratic?
her behavior.
Okay. What was she doing in particular?
I think she was trying to control the situation to how she wanted it to be.
Okay. Did you notice anything about her appearance that caused you any concern?
She was thin. She was thin.
Concerningly thin, or just you're noticing that she was a thin woman?
I think she was just a thin woman at that point.
And did you talk to her about the allegations in the case?
Yes.
And what did Ms. Asharte tell you about that?
She had told me that a friend was paying her $50 to pick up methamphetamine for that friend. And she said that she didn't know that the house was being watched, and that is how she had gotten pulled over.
Okay. Did she say this friend was with her when she did this, or just that was going to give her $50 to run this errand for her?
I don't remember if she said if the friend was with her.
Okay. Did she indicate whether or not she used methamphetamine or any illegal substances?
She denied using any illegal substances, and she denied using methamphetamines.
Okay. And you indicated that Ms. Asharte was in the home. When you first got there, who else was in the home?
It was just her and the children.
Okay. Who are which children?
It was Memphis, Lennox, Mia, and Knox.
Okay. Now, once you got this version of events from Ms. Asharte, what did you do next?
I spoke to Ms. Asharte. I told her there was concerns regarding drug use by her. I asked her to speak to the children, but like I described, her behavior was trying to take control of the situation, and my job is to ensure safety of the children. And if she was using methamphetamines, my concern was leaving children in the care of someone who is using methamphetamines. So I told her, is there someone that can maybe come and stay with you? I made an attempt to implement a safety plan. She suggested she can contact her mother, and she also suggested calling Mr. Rushford. And at that point, she also suggested that Mr. Rushford was going to be living in the home as well with her. And so she called both of them, and then they came to the home so we can do a safety plan. That is what the next steps were.
Okay. So after you implement a safety plan, do you get mom to do a drug test?
Yes, I had asked her to go in for a UA.
Okay. Do you recall when that was?
I asked her to go for on January 26th.
2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you aware if she completed that UA on January 26th, 2022?
I am aware that she did not go on January 26th, 2022.
Did she tell you why?
I do not have that information.
Okay. You just know she didn't go.
Correct.
Okay. So after January 2026, did you remain involved in the investigation of this case, or did it move somewhere else?
I was very briefly involved. I asked Mr. Rushford to also conduct a UA, and then I did send the case to Family Base, and that's when they took over. So very briefly, maybe a couple of contacts after that day.
Did Ms. Asharte ever complete any sort of drug testing for you during your investigatory phase?
Yes, on February 1st, she went for a drug test.
Okay. And I believe
2022. I'm sorry.
Okay, and that was the UA we went over earlier.
Correct.
Okay. And then after that, any further involvement?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ramirez. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Piplinski?
Yes, Ms. Ramirez, when you went to the home on the 24th, did you go by yourself, or was there anyone else from the department or law enforcement with you?
There was someone else from the department there, yes.
Who?
Her name is Gina Wiley.
And what is her role? Is she your supervisor?
No, she is a coworker.
Okay, what was her role with the department at the time?
She was in training.
All right. So did you ask Mom, Mr. Charte, if you could visit with any of the 4 children in this case when you went to the home on that day?
Yes.
Did you visit with any of those 4 children when you went to the home that day?
Not by themselves on that day. Like I described earlier, it's that day it became very erratic.
Oh.
And there was a lot of screaming involved that day.
Okay, well, were all 4 children present in the home?
Yes,
Were you able to lay eyeballs on them?
yes,
Starting with Mia, did she appear to be healthy,
yes,
properly clothed and dressed for a young teenager at that time?
yes.
Okay. No visible signs of abuse or neglect?
No,
Okay, moving on to, I'm going to ask you the same questions as to all 4 children. Moving on to the next one, Knox. Did he appear to be healthy and safe to you?
yes,
Was he appropriately dressed?
yes,
Any visible signs of abuse or neglect?
no,
Moving on to Lennox, same question. Did Lennox appear to be okay to you?
yes,
Did she appear to be healthy?
yes.
Any visible signs of abuse or neglect?
No,
Memphis, did Memphis appear to be healthy to you?
yes,
Appropriately dressed?
yes,
Any signs of abuse or neglect?
no.
Okay. And just to be clear, you didn't actually speak with any of these 4 children?
We briefly talked to them. I believe we talked to Knox, but not alone. Miss Achartha was there. It wasn't how we usually like to do our interviews with the children. Miss Achartha was screaming and like I described before.
Well, at the time, Knox would have been what, 10 years old or so? I mean, did he make any outcries of abuse or neglect to you?
No,
Okay. Did you speak with any of the other children, either alone or in the presence of someone else?
Mia was arguing with her mother at that time.
Okay. What about the other 2? Well, I guess the other 2 were young. Did you have any? Did you attend conversation with maybe Lennox at the time?
Mia, no, they were kind of behind their mother. They were shy and they were hiding behind their mother.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions, Judge.
Mr. Hardy?
Yes, very briefly. When Mr. Rushford called you the first time, did he seem concerned about his children's well-being?
Yes,
Because of Miss Charte's drug usage?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Okay. You mentioned that Miss Charte seemed to be under the impression that Mr. Rushford was going to be living in her home. Mr. Rushford never indicated he intended to do that, did he?
that is correct.
Okay. And the UA that you referred Mr. Rushford to, what were the results of that?
He was negative.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Mr. McCormick, did you have anything for Ms. Ramirez?
I had no questions. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Ms. Smith?
Yes, Judge, just briefly. Ms. Ramirez, you said that the mother was screaming and yelling when you got to the home. Do you recall what was she screaming and yelling about?
That she's a good mother, that there's no reason why we needed to be there, that she didn't want to stay with her mother. She insisted that Mr. Rushford was gonna live with her, that he was gonna listen to her. Because I was trying to come up with a safety plan that was doable for the family, that accommodated the family. the best that we could. And then Mia was frustrated with her mother. At one point, Marissa got on her knees, and I think Mia had told Marissa that her friends knew about her arrest, and Marissa got on her knees and she's like, how do your friends know? And Mia said, because you're on Facebook because of Busted. And Marissa said, I'm on Facebook, and she was wailing, and they were screaming at each other. It was a mess that day.
So is it fair to say that this was a disturbing scene?
Yes.
And was this being played out in the presence of the younger children, Knox, Lennox, and Memphis?
Yes. I think Mia, she took a very
Objection,
Mature.
non-responsive. She answered the
Sustained.
question.
Wait for a question, Ms. Ramirez.
So yes, this was being played out in front of the younger children as well.
yes.
And was anyone trying to calm the children or remove them from that very disturbing scene that you just described?
Mia did.
So is it fair to say that for the most part, the children were present though for the mother's outbursts and acting out and screaming and yelling?
Objection
Yes.
asked and answered.
Sustained.
What were the children, what was the children's demeanor during this verbal altercation?
Surprisingly quiet.
Did they appear to be fearful, or how did they appear to you?
No, I don't remember fear.
And where were they physically? Was mom holding any of them, or just what was the scene? What did the scene look like?
I do remember
I'm going to object to the relevance.
Overruled.
I remember Marissa holding the younger ones in her lap while we were waiting for her mother to come, and they would get up and go play, and Mia coming in and out and Knox coming in and out, but I do remember her holding the younger ones.
Was it surprising to you that in the middle of this altercation and hullabaloo going on, that these children did not react, that they had just a non-effective response?
Yes.
Did it appear to you that this was a normalized behavior for the children?
I'm sorry, what was-
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm going to sustain that.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Pass witness.
Mr. Baker, do you have any questions for Ms. Ramirez?
No questions, Your Honor.
Anyone else have? Go ahead.
To Your Honor. Thank
Go ahead.
you. Ms. Ramirez, this is an investigator. Knox was 10 or 11 at the time. Did you go to visit the school? Did you go visit him at school?
I don't remember going to the school for Knox.
Did you go to school for any of the other kiddos?
Yes.
Which one?
I went for Mia and Lennox's school.
Lennox at the time was 5. I mean, you went to like a preschool or a kindergarten?
Yes, they were going to a pre-K center.
Okay, did you have any concerns based on what happened at the pre-K or the kinder school?
Yes, the pre-K school had reported there was some concerns with Lennox, that there was some possible developmental delays, as Lennox's bottom had always been raw from diaper rash, and had reported that Miss Achartha had always been difficult to get a hold of.
Okay. And with respect to Mia's school, any concerns reported by the school?
No, not there. She wasn't there that day though.
Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Yeah.
Anyone
Very
else have
briefly.
any? Mr. Hardy?
Yes. So when you're meeting with the family, Mr. Rushford was in the room the whole time. Is that correct?
Not the whole time. He was at work. When developing the safety plan, he did not want his children to go with Marissa's mother. So he came to get his children.
Okay. What was his demeanor like?
He was, at that point, he was cooperative, and he agreed to cooperate with the department.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
I am their permanency specialist since March 31st.
Okay, March 31st, you said you got on the case?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that coincide with the date that the department was granted TMC of the children?
Yes.
Okay. And when you first got the case, what do you do in order to prepare yourself to handle these cases going forward?
I review any records that we have regarding the parents, regarding the case. This case came from FBSS. I reviewed those records, prior history, things like that.
And what is the purpose of reviewing that documentation?
So I have a better understanding of the family and the clients before I reach out to them.
And based on your review of those documents, what were the department's concerns with, and we'll focus on Marissa Charte today, on Mrs. Charte's ability or inability to be a caregiver for her children?
So the department's concerns were this was her 4th case with CPS, and she tested positive for methamphetamines, as well as at this point, the children had tested positive for methamphetamines and or amphetamines.
And why would the use by the mother be a concern?
It basically her lack of control in her ability to care for her children. If you're on a substance, your mental abilities are impaired. So she would not be able to provide a safe and stable environment for them.
Okay. And the children, I think we've established now that Memphis was approximately 2, Lennox was 4, about to be 5. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And those children, are they at the age where they could self-protect?
No, ma'am.
So be dependent on mom for everything. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you think Knox to some extent would rely on mom for his daily needs?
Yes.
Okay. And does that go to your statement of lack of ability to care for the children? Or something?
Objection, she's leading the witness.
Don't lead your witness, Ms. House.
And I'll try and rephrase. What did their reliance on mom and her drug use, what was that specific concern?
So we were concerned that she wouldn't be able to feed or clothe her children. She wouldn't be able to provide them the necessary medical appointments, necessary dental appointments. She would be impaired in the case of an emergency. If something were to happen, she would not be able to protect her children.
Okay. And what about the children themselves testing positive for methamphetamine and or amphetamines? Did that cause any particular concerns?
Yes.
What are those?
So with children testing positive for methamphetamines, that can mess with their mental cognitive growth abilities.
Okay. When you first got the case and you first get any case, you said you review. What is your next step after reviewing the prior documentation to get an understanding of what you need to do in your case? What do you do after that?
I would reach out to the previous caseworker and get her take on or his take on the case. Okay. And after that, I would reach out to the parents, or I'd reach out to, like this one, I reached out to Marissa.
Okay. And who was the prior caseworker for Mrs. Charte?
That was Sarah Cardwell with the FBSS case.
And you said this was their 4th case with CPS. Did you reach out to any of the other prior caseworkers?
I did not. However, my supervisor.
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
Non-responsive.
Overruled.
My supervisor at the time had been a previous supervisor on her case. So she had the history.
Okay, so you spoke with that supervisor?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was that?
That one was Julie Dorian Brownlow, as well as now my current supervisor was also a supervisor on one of the cases, and that is Christy Dorr.
Okay, thank you. And then you said you reached out to Marissa. Do you recall approximately when you first started contacting Mrs. Charte?
It would have been right after the April hearing, but I'm sorry, I don't have the date for my first contact with her. I could review my notes if that's okay.
Was it early April, late April?
It was early April.
That's fine. And just regarding your first contact, was mom responsive to you? Did she hang up the phone on you? What was that contact like?
It took 3 different tries in order for her to respond to me over multiple days.
So can you explain what you mean by that?
So I first called and left a message. I normally follow that up with a text message explaining who I am and my information. I had not heard back, so I again attempted another text message. I did not hear back. And then I called her and she returned my call that time.
Okay. And approximately how many days would you say it took for Mrs. Charte to respond to you for that first contact?
So I believe it was 6 days.
Okay.
That included a weekend. So.
Okay. Right. And what were you attempting to establish during that first contact?
Introducing myself and meeting with her so we could discuss the allegations and come up with her family plan of service.
Okay. And did you provide a phone number for yourself at that time?
Yes.
Did you provide an email address for contact?
I don't think I did at that time.
Okay. Has your phone number changed since that first contact or attempted contact? All right. You talked about a family plan. How do you create these family plans?
So we do an assessment with the parents and we ask multiple questions regarding their history, their family history, their finances, their criminal history, any substance abuse history, mental health history. And then we also have a family group meeting that's facilitated.
Okay. Did Ms. Asharte attend a family group meeting to
Yes.
develop that family plan of service?
Yes,
And so was a family plan of service created in this case?
yes,
Okay. And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to share screen.
Okay, you should be able to now.
Okay. Exhibit 7. Are you able to see Petitioner's Exhibit 7?
yes,
Do you recognize Petitioner's Exhibit 7?
yes.
And what is Petitioner's Exhibit 7?
It is our family plan of service.
Okay. And for whom?
This one is for Marissa Asharte.
Does it say that on there?
Yes, the primary participant as
Oh, okay. And do you recognize Petitioner's Exhibit 7 as a family plan of service that was created for Ms. Asharte?
yes,
Okay. And just, I'm going to go down to the bottom of page 1. Do you see on here that there is also a seal in blue?
yes,
And does that seal indicate that this is certified to be a true and correct copy?
yes,
Okay. And I'm just going to scroll through all the pages. You see that seal again on page 2,
yes,
page 3,
yes,
4,
yes,
5,
yes,
6,
yes,
7,
yes,
8,
yes,
9,
yes.
Why don't you just scroll through them and see if she sees them at the end? Just ask if she saw them on all pages.
certainly. And in scrolling through the document, did you recognize that to be the family plan of service you created?
Yes,
Is that a fair and accurate, or true and accurate copy of the plan you created?
yes,
Okay. And Your Honor, at this time, I've moved to admit Petitioner 7.
Any objections?
No, no.
No objection.
No objection.
Did you present this in court?
yes,
And I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 8. Are you able to see this?
yes.
And what does this document purport to be?
It's a status hearing.
And is it related to the case that we are here for today?
Yes,
And again, I'm going to go through and show you the seal. Okay, you see the certification.
Petitioner 8 is admitted.
Okay, and going to page 7 of Petitioner's 8, Ms. Whitley, do you see that there's an order here that the family plans of service were made in order of the court
yes,
with some modifications for Mr. Rushford and Mr. Laughlin? Is that accurate?
yes,
I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. So when the family plan was made in order of the court, is that something you went over with Ms. Asharte?
yes.
And in discussing it with her, what did you explain was the importance of that plan?
That she completed
Okay, and why did she need to complete it?
to alleviate the concerns the department had, why her children are in our care.
Did Ms. Asharte indicate to you in any way that she did not understand that expectation?
No,
When you review a family plan of service with someone, and with Ms. Asharte in particular, how did you advise her of what the expectations were?
we go over it line by line.
Okay, and I'm going to go through Ms. Asharte's. I want to go through Ms. Asharte's family plan of service, and let's start with. Do you have a copy of it?
I do. Can you give me 1 second?
Sure.
Okay, I'm ready.
Now, I want to direct your attention, and if you need me to pull up the exhibit again, please let me know. That, and before we go into this, let me back up. Did you talk to Ms. Asharte about her CPS history?
I did.
Okay. Can you tell me about that conversation?
We discussed Mia's, the end of the last CPS case that she had, and discussed Mia moving back in with her.
What was that conversation?
We had discussed that there were concerns because Mia was not supposed to be moving back in with mom. Mia was supposed to stay with her grandmother, Jamie.
Okay. And did Ms. Asharte provide you any explanation for that?
Yes,
And what was that?
she stated that her mom could not handle Mia and that they had first tried to give Mia to Mr. Laughlin, and that was unsuccessful. So her mother then gave Mia to her.
Did Ms. Asharte make any indication of whether she had gone through a service plan in either any of these prior cases?
Yes,
Okay, can you tell me about that?
in the most recent prior case, she,
Yeah, I'm going to object to mom's compliance or lack thereof with prior service plans from prior cases is irrelevant to this case.
Does anyone have a response?
Well, Your Honor, I just think it goes to her understanding of what's necessary and needed in this case.
I think past behavior, Mr. Krupinski, is a huge indicator of future behavior. I'm going to allow it.
Ms. Whiteley, you can continue.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Right, we were talking about any prior service plans mom had engaged with in prior cases.
Yes, the prior case, she had a family plan of service and she engaged in it completely.
What did she tell you about that?
That she was successful with it. She completed her alcohol treatment and she was able to get her children back. Well, she was able to get everybody but Mia back.
Okay. Did she talk to you about specifically what services she engaged in the prior cases?
Yes, in the prior case, she had engaged in inpatient alcohol rehab,
Okay.
as well as she had engaged in therapy with therapist Trisha Boone. She had engaged in parenting classes. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the other things she engaged in.
Okay. Did she indicate to you that, in those past cases, there was any confusion? She had any concerns about the expectations of her?
No, my understanding was she was overly engaged and extremely helpful in the previous case.
Okay. All right. And so now getting back to the family plan that you created for Ms. Asharte in the current case, let's start walking through that. Is housing, safe and appropriate housing, something that's required?
Yes,
And what is that requirement?
that she maintain a safe, stable, and appropriate home for her family. She is to let me know of her address, her phone number, and any changes. She has to provide the home free of environmental hazards. She has to present her home to the department. She will allow us access to the property and the home. And she's to provide a copy of her lease or her rental agreement.
Okay. And did Mrs. Asharte do all of those things regarding housing? Excuse me.
Eventually, yes.
What do you mean by eventually?
She did not provide a copy of her lease until September in this case.
Okay. And is she the main leaseholder on that?
No,
Okay. Who is?
Mr. David Rushford.
Did you have any concerns about this housing that Mrs. Asharte has presented to you?
I just had concerns regarding the lease agreement. I thought that Mr. Rushford and Mrs. Asharte were not in communication.
Okay.
I have concerns on how Miss Asharte is affording this home.
Why is that?
The home is $2,000 a month for rent. And Miss Asharte works at a restaurant as a waitress. I do not believe her income meets the requirement for covering this home.
Okay. And that leads me to the next question. Employment. Are there any expectations regarding employment?
That she will obtain and maintain legal employment, and she will provide me with documentation, paycheck stubs, a way to verify. If she is not able to work, she must provide proof that she is disabled.
Okay. Has Mrs. Asharte provided you proof of stable employment?
Again, in September.
Okay. And since then, have you asked for updated verification, new verification?
I have not.
Regarding any sort of parenting skills, classes, or courses, is Mrs. Asharte required to engage in that?
She is.
Okay. And has Mrs. Asharte engaged in and completed a parenting course?
She has engaged in one recently, but it is, to our knowledge, not completed.
Okay. How do parents prove completion of required services?
They would provide us with a completed certificate.
Has Mrs. Asharte provided you with a certificate of completion for a parenting course?
No.
When you ask for these services that parents engage in them, how do they get involved with them? Do they go out on their own and do it? Do you sign them up? How does that work?
We would send them for referrals on the family plan. There is a phone number for them to reach out to the services themselves.
Okay. And did you do your part and send out the referral as required?
Yes.
Do you recall when you did that?
It would have been May.
May 2022?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that aspect has not been completed. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is there a requirement regarding contact with the department?
Yes.
What is that requirement?
She is to contact her caseworker on a weekly basis.
Okay. Has Miss Asharte maintained weekly contact with yourself?
No.
Okay. Has your phone number changed at any point?
No.
Have you provided her any additional ways of contacting you, like email?
Yes.
Has she emailed you weekly?
No.
All right. Were there any services required to help Mrs. Asharte address any mental health concerns that might be present?
Yes.
What were those requirements?
So for her mental health, we required that she attend and get a psychosocial therapy as well as a psychological.
Okay. Did Miss Asharte complete those requirements?
Yes, but again, it was very late in the case.
When approximately?
Her psychosocial was completed on November 16th, and her psychological was completed on October 24th.
Okay. And with regards to these examinations, is there also a requirement regarding any follow through with recommendations?
Yes, we ask that they complete these psychological and psychosocial and follow any recommendations made.
Have recommendations been followed through with for either the psychosocial or psychological?
No.
Regarding any sort of therapy, is Ms. Acharte engaged in any therapy?
She was, but she has not engaged in the last month and a half.
Okay. How often was Ms. Acharte engaging in therapy?
She engaged one time to complete the assessment.
We talked about drug testing and that being the major concern here. What services or requirements did you ask Ms. Acharte to complete regarding her substance abuse or use?
So we asked her to do an OSAR, as well as to follow any recommendations made by that. And then we asked that they drug test on a random basis.
Okay. And those were the requirements for Ms. Acharte?
Yes.
Okay. And regarding the OSAR, did she comply with her OSAR?
So she actually had 2 OSARs through this case. The first OSAR, she was recommended to continue AA recovery support services, and she's never provided me any proof that she did continue those services.
Okay. What about drug testing? Is that something that's been requested?
Yes.
What has Ms. Acharte's level of cooperation been regarding her drug testing?
50-50.
Okay.
50% she goes, 50% she does not.
Okay. How many tests have you sent Ms. Acharte for approximately?
16.
Okay. How many tests has Ms. Acharte completed for you?
8.
Okay. When was the last time Ms. Acharte tested for you?
The last time she went for me was November 22nd.
Okay. Have you requested any tests since November 22nd?
Yes.
What dates?
I requested it on December 8th and then again on December 30th.
Okay. And what types of tests were you asking Ms. Acharte to complete on those 2 dates?
Those 2 tests, I was trying to get her to complete a hair follicle.
Okay. And did she comply with either of those?
No.
Did she respond to your text and let you know why she wasn't taking them?
No.
How many hair follicle tests has Ms. Acharte completed during the pendency of this case?
2.
Okay. And do you recall when those were?
So the first one was the one previously discussed on March 18th. Then she completed one for me 183 days later on September 7th.
Okay. And I'm going to share with you what's been previously marked and admitted as Petitioner's Exhibit 6. Page 4. On page 4, we see a hair follicle specimen from Marissa Acharte on September 7th, 2022. Were you able to see that?
Yes.
What were the results of that hair follicle test?
She was positive for amphetamine and methamphetamine.
Okay. And when you got this positive hair follicle test for Miss Acharte, did you talk to her about that?
I did.
And what did she tell you?
It was wrong.
Was that her entire response?
Her entire response was that it couldn't be true. She doesn't do drugs. She doesn't do meth.
Did she maintain that position throughout the entire case that she did not use meth?
Yes.
And then, so this hair follicle test in December, would that have been the next 90-day test?
Yes.
Okay. But we don't have that.
No.
How has your contact with Miss Acharte been recently? Does she engage with you?
She does not. She texts me very long texts, basically talking about how horrible I am and how horrible CPS is and how we're destroying her family and it's all our fault.
Okay. Has that type of contact been consistent throughout the whole case, or is that a recent development?
No, it's consistent.
Okay. Now, earlier I asked you if she contacted you weekly as required by the Family Plan of Service. What has her contact with you been like during this case, if it wasn't weekly?
It is sporadic. There are periods where she talks to me on a regular basis. And then there was a full month in the middle of this case where she did not respond to anybody at all.
Okay. How long? You said a whole month. Would you recall when that was?
I believe it was actually, yes, August 3rd to September 6th. We had no contact.
Okay. Now, I want to jump back to the drug test. When she would go take the drug test, did she take them as requested or was it something else?
She did not take them as requested. There were multiple times that I would send her and she wouldn't go for anywhere from 2 to 5 days after my request.
Okay. When was the last time you had contact with Miss Asharte?
It would have been in December.
Okay. And since then, has she's been non-responsive to you or you haven't reached
Yes,
out?
I haven't reached out. I apologize.
Except for the drug test.
Well, that was in December. I haven't actually sent her for any in January.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else in the family plan of service that Ms. Asharte has been required to engage in?
So she was also required to engage in therapy for domestic violence, family violence.
Okay.
We attempted to send a referral for that on May 12th. We did send a referral on May 12th for her to attend with a therapist, Vicki Kaler. Miss Asharte did not attend, did not respond. So we again sent her on November 10th to a new therapist, and that is the one she completed the psychosocial with and never continued therapy.
Okay. So what is Miss Asharte's level of compliance with the family plan of service?
She is not complying.
Okay. Now I want to talk about visitation with the children. There's been some discussion about no-shows. Can you please elaborate and let the court know what Miss Asharte's visitation began at and what her level of compliance was with that visitation?
So her visitation, she has the 4 children. So in the beginning of this case, she was having face-to-face visits with her kids twice a month. And we were a little delayed on the Zoom calls, but she was getting Zoom calls every other week that she didn't have face-to-face visits. So in the beginning, she had, well, I will just tell you, a total of 24 visits throughout the entire case. That includes both face-to-face and Zoom. And she did a total of 8 no-shows with face-to-face and Zoom.
Okay.
Can I ask you to clarify that for me?
Yeah.
24 that she went to, or 24 set up and she only went to, what is that, 16?
Yes, she had 24 offered to her and she missed 8 of them.
Thank you.
Okay. And when Miss Asharte would fail to appear for these visits, how would she let you know if she did at all?
She did not. Multiple times I sat with the children, or on the Zoom calls, it's me and the children on Zoom waiting for her to come on. In the beginning of the case, when we had the face-to-faces at Landa Park, I would have to call and text Marissa to get her to come to the visits. There were 2 times I had to wake her up. One of the visits were requested to just be her and her son Knox, and me and Knox waited at the park for 45 minutes before Miss Asharte showed up. I still allowed that visit to go the full time for the benefit of Knox, but that's how the visits have gone.
What do you mean when you say you had to wake her up on multiple or a few occasions?
I had to call multiple times before she would answer, and then she would tell me, oh my God, I was asleep. I'm coming right now.
Okay. When you're sitting there with the kids and they're waiting on mom, either by Zoom or in person, did you notice any changes in their demeanor?
They get sad and they ask me repeatedly if she's coming. And then for the Knox visit specifically, he kept asking me, will I still get my hour with her? Will I still get my hour with her?
When you say they were sad, what do you mean by that? Like, what did you see that makes you believe they were sad?
Their faces are sad. They're sitting next to me on the bench when they first get to a visit. They're super excited. And then as we sit and say, we're still waiting for mommy, you can just, I can see the disappointment on their face.
Okay. Now, was Mrs. Asharte ordered to pay child support in this case?
Yes.
And has she provided any proof of paying her child support to you?
No.
Has she provided you any gifts for the children?
No.
Any other means of supporting the kids while they've been in the care of the department?
No,
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about the children. We'll start with Knox. Where is he currently placed?
he is currently placed with his maternal grandmother.
And how old is Knox?
Knox is 10.
And how is he doing?
He is doing good. He's meeting all of his grade marks. He's attending school. He's making friends. He's been a part of that community where they live off and on I want to say since he was born. So he's got a lot of support where he's at right now.
And when is the last time he had visits with his mother?
The last visit would have been in October
Okay. And the girls, where are they placed?
in the foster home.
And from what you've been able to observe, and have you observed them in the foster home
Yes,
on one or many occasions?
many occasions.
Okay. How many times would you say you've gotten out to see them in that environment?
7?
Okay. And based on your observations, do you have any concerns about their placement there?
No.
Do they appear to be bonding with Ms. Heidemann?
Yes.
And what do you see that makes you believe that?
They come to her for help. They have no problem running up and hugging her. They run around the house, play with the toys. They make a mess and they're very comfortable in the environment.
Do you have any concerns about their safety and well-being in that home?
I do not.
Okay. As far as, the children's growth and development since they've been out of their mother's care, do you see any changes in that?
I do.
Can you explain that?
So I see more changes in the younger kiddos than I do with Knox. Knox is doing well with his grandma. He seems to be used to the situation. So I feel that I haven't noticed a big difference between when he came into care and now. As for Lennox and Memphis, they are thriving. They have met milestones that for Lennox should have been met a while ago. And Memphis she's a tough little cookie and she's done wonderful where she is.
What milestones were you referring to for Lennox?
I was referring to the bathroom issues, numbers, which she may have known them before, but she was not comfortable saying them. When I first picked up Lennox for a visit in the beginning, when she was placed in her previous placement, I tried to get her to sing ABCs with me in the car and she couldn't do it. She would let me sing it and she'd talk to me, but she would not sing the song with me. So I felt like she didn't know it. And now she knows it. She is so excited to write her name. Every time I come over, she scribbles all over my notebook to show me how much better she's getting at it.
Hang on, guys. Mr. Rushford, don't be yelling at the camera like that, okay? We're in a courtroom. Go ahead.
And at this point, have the concerns that brought the children into the care with regards to the mother and her action or inaction, have they been alleviated?
No, ma'am.
What concerns does the department still have about Marissa Charte's ability to safely parent and care for these children?
We're still concerned about her drug usage. We're concerned about her following through on her services. We don't have anything that has been completed. We are 286 days on this case and everything just keeps getting pushed off. She hasn't completed anything that was asked of her. So we still have concerns.
Okay. And what is the department's position today regarding termination of mother's parental rights?
We would like to terminate her parental rights.
And what is that based on?
That is based on the fact that she hasn't been able to complete any of her services. She has not given us a clean hair follicle, so we have no proof that she is not using at this time.
What concerns, if any, do you have for the children if they would be returned to her care?
I am concerned that the children would not be properly cared for and we would end up right back here in court again.
Okay. And regarding the children, do you feel it's in their best interest to have Marissa Charte's parental rights terminated?
I do.
And why is that?
I feel that her inconsistencies, her drug use, her constantly not attending visits is just a constant disappointment to the children. it's messing with their emotional well-being.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Kaplinsky?
Thank you, Judge.
Mhm.
Okay, Ms. Whiteley, you opened your testimony saying you came onto the case on March the 31st. You then suggested you got up to your speed by reviewing everything, and your concern with mom at the beginning of the case, and as you just restated a moment ago, is drug use. And you testified up front that drug use and parenting at the same time is concerning because the kids are not old enough to protect themselves. You suggested that drug use while parenting would lead a mother not to be able to feed or clothe her children or keep up with the children's medical appointments. So that's how you opened your testimony today. So you first put them onto the case March the 31st. You identified these concerns. When is the first time you actually met the three kiddos immediately after coming onto this case? In person, you yourself visit with these kids.
So I visited with Lennox and Memphis on April 12th.
April 12th. Okay, let's stop right there. Now, did you see evidence on April 12th when you went to visit with Lennox and Memphis for the first time that Marissa, her mother, had not been properly feeding or clothing either one of these children?
The children had been in placement with their grandmother since March 31st, so I can't testify to immediately leaving Marissa's care.
Oh, okay. Did you hear your coworker, for lack of a better word, Sarah Cardwell testify this morning?
I did.
Oh, good. Now, do you have any reason to disagree with any of her testimony that she offered this morning?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. She's already testified, and I believe this is where he's going, that she doesn't know what they look like when they were first removed. So anything about Ms. Cardwell's testimony is speculation.
Okay, overruled.
That you may answer if you can.
Can you ask it again?
If you
know
can.
I'm going to ask a different question. I think I understand Ms. Howard's objection a little more clearly. It's the testimony. Did you hear testimony this morning from Cecilia Ramirez, who actually visited with the kids in the home prior to the removal?
I did.
Okay. Did you hear her testify that upon her observation, all the children appeared to be properly dressed, properly fed, no immediate concerns or indication of any kind of abuse or neglect?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have, in your review of the file, did you have any reason to believe mom was not properly keeping the children's medical appointments prior to coming into state care?
Based on my prior reading of the case files, no.
Okay. You testified when you came onto this case that drug use can jeopardize the children's cognitive abilities. When you first met with these kids and started developing, I guess, a relationship as a caseworker and child relationship, did you have any reason to believe that any of these three kiddos that were in the younger three, that any of their cognitive abilities had been jeopardized in any sense or fashion by mom, and at all, period?
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly. Can you ask it another way, maybe?
Sure, I'll try. Again, you opened up your testimony this morning by saying a parent's drug use can jeopardize a child's cognitive development. Do you have any reason to see in these three kiddos that their cognitive development had been jeopardized or delayed in any fashion at all?
I believe there was something going on with Lennox and Memphis.
Were you able to identify something specific other than just a belief?
We did have some testing done on Lennox at a later date, as well as Memphis when she turned 3, but at the time that you're talking about, no, I hadn't had time to do it.
So, okay, so you're saying something come up after the fact?
I'm stating that I saw concerns when I met the girls, and we further had testing after that.
What testing did you have after that?
We had a psychological done on Lennox. We had a CANS assessment done on Lennox, and we had an early childhood intervention done on Memphis.
Okay. Did any of this testing indicate that the children were developmentally delayed in any way or had diminished cognitive capacity?
For Lennox, yes.
What did it show?
If you could give me a minute, I can pull up the psychological. I'm sorry, I can't reiterate exactly how they worded it for Lennox, but she was recommended she would need therapy, play therapy, and I believe intellectual and cognitive assistance. They basically advised us to watch her when she started school. They believed there would be a delay and she would need assistance.
Okay. You testified regarding mom's compliance or lack thereof with the service plan. With respect to the housing, you said mom eventually provided a lease, but you had concerns that Rushford was, I guess, the primary leaseholder. Why was that concerning to you?
He doesn't live at the home and they have a very toxic relationship. So he at any time could remove his agreement on the lease. So she would not be able to stay in the home.
Well, I'm not sure it's quite as easy as that, but they had children together. They were co-parenting two children, notwithstanding the fact that they weren't in a relationship. Isn't that true?
I'm gonna object to Mr. Poplinski testifying.
Overruled.
You may answer.
Who's asked the question?
Well, I'm sorry, please repeat.
Mr. Rushford and Mrs. Charte have to co-parent two young children, correct?
Yes,
Is it unusual for the father to provide financial assistance for the housing for his children?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
in my experience, I would hope that a father would provide housing for his children.
Okay. So the fact that the rent was $2,000 and you had concerns over her ability to pay that, maybe isn't it possible that Mr. Rushford saw that as just a part of his responsibility as a father to these two kids to assist with the rent?
Objection calls for speculation.
That is speculation.
Okay. Okay. The financial aspect aside, did you walk through the home?
I'm sorry, yes, I did.
Okay. Were there any glaring concerns in terms of cleanliness or space or accommodations or anything of that nature?
No, it's a very nice home.
Okay. Suitable for kids?
Yes,
Okay. Now, with respect to parenting class, you testified she engaged in one recently but has not completed it. What is the name of the provider for the parenting class that she is engaged in or has been engaged in?
optimal.
That's it, optimal?
I believe it's optimal. I'm sorry. I know there's another word, but I can't recall it right this minute.
Okay. Options for life, maybe?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, did Ms. Acharte communicate to you that she was taking parenting classes with this particular provider?
Yes,
Did you reach out to the provider to get a feel for how she was progressing? That's a yes or a no.
yes,
Okay. Did you get positive feedback?
yes.
Okay. All right. Now, with respect to the mental health issues, you identified a psychosocial evaluation, which you completed November the 16th, a psychological, which you completed 10/24, but you suggested some follow-up recommendations that came out of these two evaluations were not followed up on at all. What are some of the recommendations that came out of these two evaluations that Mr. Charte did not, in your opinion, follow up with?
So she did not follow up with remaining or not using substances. She did not follow up on attending her therapy, continuing counseling. She did not follow up, or if she did not report to me regarding her mental health and her prescriptions for her mental health.
Okay. Is that it?
I would have to review my note again to go over both of them, and to continue drug testing and that.
Okay. No, okay. You said she didn't follow up with her recommendations, one of which was not using substances. If these evaluations were done on 10/24, the first one, the psychological, and the psychosocial was done on 11/16, the reports associated with those two evaluations would have come out shortly after the evaluations were done. What evidence do you have that she tested positive or is currently using any controlled substances after these 2 dates in time?
Her refusal to go get tested.
Okay, so what you term as a refusal in your mind is indication, well, therefore she must be using.
At the beginning of this case, the judge specifically states to clients that if they do not go for a drug test, it's presumed positive. So my job, I presume it's positive.
I'm aware of the court's admonishments in these types of cases, but that's the only evidence you have is just by default. If she didn't go there, therefore she must be using. That's the department's position.
Yes.
All right. Now, the next thing you said, she did not follow up with the recommendations by therapy. So let's address that one a little bit. You said she has not engaged in therapy in the last month and a half. To the best of your knowledge, who was the therapist she last engaged with a month and a half ago?
Trisha Boone.
Okay. Now, have you reached out to Trisha Boone regarding mom's compliance or progress with the therapy with Ms. Boone?
Yes.
Okay. Did Ms. Boone respond?
Yes.
Did you get positive feedback from Ms. Boone?
No.
Okay, now is this the same Ms. Boone that you said mom worked with in the prior CPS case that she completed successfully?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the last therapy session, I think you said a month and a half ago, that would have been what, early January-ish? Can you tell me the exact date of the last therapy session she had with Ms. Boone?
11/16.
11/16. Do you know whether there were future appointments that were set up and canceled or did not take place, canceled by either Ms. Boone or my client there after the 16th?
December 8th, she did not respond to Miss Boone.
What about after that?
No, Miss Boone said there'd been no contact.
You also referenced providing, I want to make sure I understand it correctly, prescriptions for her mental health. Did you specifically ask Mr. Charte to provide you like a photocopy of a script or something like that, or a pill bottle or something along those lines?
In the beginning of this case, yes, I asked for that as well as the doctor's name that was prescribing it to her.
Okay, well, you say in the beginning of this case, but moments ago you said this was a recommendation that come out of either the psychosocial or the psychological, which happened late in the case, October and November. So my question to you is, after you got the reports from these two providers in October or November, and you saw that recommendation, did you then re-ask Mr. Charte for evidence or proof or a copy of a script or something to show what mental health medication she was taking?
I provided her a copy of both reports, so she knew what was required.
That's not my question, Ms. Whitley. Did you ask mom for a copy of a script or some evidence or proof that she's taking her mental health meds?
No.
Okay. Okay, now I want to address, if I could. Okay, you said she did 2 OSARs. She did an initial OSAR, and there was a recommendation for AA meetings, I think is what you said. And you say she never did any. I mean, did you discuss mom's compliance or lack thereof of attendance with AA meetings and with my client? Did you discuss that with her?
I never said she never did it. I said she never provided me the proof.
Did Mr. Charte ever suggest to you that she was doing it? Attending AA meetings?
Yeah,
So did you ask her for proof?
I did.
Not well, where there was the first, there must be a second. You testified she took a second OSAR. What were the results of that OSAR?
She was recommended for outpatient for mental health. She was to explore her options through her medical insurance. And she was again encouraged to continue report recovery services with AA or NA.
Okay. So what referrals did you send out to accommodate the recommendations from the second OSAR?
I was not able to send out any referrals.
Why?
She told them because Mrs. Charte reported she had medical health insurance and would look for outpatient mental health on her own.
What was the date of the second OSAR?
If you'd like me to look it up, I can. I don't have the date in front of me, but it would have been in October.
In October, okay.
It would have been after her positive hair follicle on September 7th.
Okay, now you testified that she was about 50-50 in a random drug tested. You requested 16, she completed 8. The 8 that she completed, how many of those 8 were UAs and how many of them were hair follicle tests?
All of them were UAs.
Okay, were any of those UAs dirty?
No,
What's the date of the most recent UA?
11/22.
All right. Now, did she ever provide, did you ever have a conversation with Mrs. Charte regarding her failure? And I'm talking about these last 2 or 3 months only. That's all I care about. In the last 2 or 3 months, did you have a conversation with Mrs. Charte regarding her failure to attend any of these requested drug tests?
I've had conversations regarding her completing her family plan to get her kids back.
Well,
So
yeah,
to
I know
me,
that.
Well, to me,
Drug
that
testing.
covers the drug testing. It covers
Well-
all of it.
Okay, well, I'll give you specifics. On 12/8, you requested a UA. That's, you requested a drug test. The 12/8 test that you requested, was that a UA or a hair follicle?
I tried to do a hair follicle, but it would have been random to Miss Asharte. She wouldn't have known.
What did you send her for on December the 8th? You
A
told
hair
her
follicle.
a hair follicle test. And when she didn't go, did you have a conversation with her as to why she didn't go?
No, she does not respond.
All right. On 12/30, you said you sent her. I presume this was for another hair follicle test.
Yes.
And your testimony is she did not go.
Yep.
Did you reach out to her and ask her why she did not go?
No.
All right. Did she ever suggest to you that she had a medical issue and was diagnosed?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to object to Mr.
I haven't even asked the
Poplinski
question yet, Your Honor.
I'm going to object to him testifying. She has already said that there wasn't any conversation about why they didn't go. So anything further is just an attempt to put something on the record that is not in evidence. And it's also a question that has already been answered because she said they did not have a conversation about it.
Mr. Poplinski, that sounds true.
I'll ask it a different way, Your Honor.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Judge. Miss Whitley, were you in court on November 22nd when we appeared in court on a hearing on my motion?
Sorry. Yes.
Did you hear Mom or Mr. Charte explain to the judge that she had a medical condition called
I'm going to object
alopecia?
to hearsay.
Oh,
You may answer.
That was the first time I heard that. Yes.
Oh, okay. And that was on November 22. Between then and now, have you and I personally discussed that issue?
Objection, Your Honor. It is hearsay. It's Mr. Poplinski's hearsay about his conversation.
I'm not asking the substance of the conversation, just whether it took place.
I'm going to allow it.
Did you and I discuss this?
I talked to you on the phone last night.
Prior to that, did we discuss this?
I don't remember if we did. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Well, you're okay. You've already acknowledged hearing her suggested in open court back on November 22. Since that day, between then and now, have you ever reached out to Mr. Charte yourself to discuss that matter?
No.
No. Okay. You also testified with respect to random drug testing. When she did go, she would often go 2 to 5 days after the request was made. Did you ask her to explain on any of those occasions why she went 2 to 5 days after and not immediately?
A majority of the time, she provided her excuses to me.
Okay. And what were those excuses?
I'm going to object to hearsay. He's trying to offer his own client's statements. She is not a party opponent to him. Therefore, it is hearsay and there's no exception.
Well, I could overrule that.
I received a text message that she had a blowout on her truck one of the times. Another time I received a text message that she had completely forgotten that I requested the test. 2 other times she would ask me if she could go on another day because something came up.
Okay. Moving on to visitation. is it your testimony that on the 8 visits she missed, on none of those occasions did she reach out to you to let you know she either wouldn't be coming or would be late?
So on the 8 no-shows,
Right.
she did not reach out to me.
That's what I'm asking. Okay. Did you ever address with Mr. Charte her obligation to pay child support?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
What did you tell her?
In the beginning of the case, her previous attorney and I had spoken to her about what she needed to pay to her mom. I'm sorry, what she needed to pay to Mr. Rushford at the time, and then what she needed to pay to her mom. And then it switched to paying to Knox's previous placement.
You said as a conversation you had with her and her previous attorney, that would have been, I guess, Miss Aldrich up until I came on in like June or July. Does that sound about right?
I think you came on in August.
Okay, well, August. All right. Since August, have you had a follow-up conversation with Mr. Charte regarding child support?
No,
No. All right. So what is the basis of your testimony then that she has not paid any?
based on the placements responding to me that they're not getting child support from her.
Okay. Did you? No, I think we've established, or it's been established, that I think in October-ish, the court, the department and the court, the department, per the court's orders, discontinued mom's visitation. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, did you ever explain to Mr. Charte, no, did you ever have a conversation that, notwithstanding the court's order and your directive, she was still allowed to provide gifts for Christmas and holidays and things of that nature?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Sure. After visitation was discontinued, did you ever have any kind of follow-up conversation with Mr. Charte that she would still be allowed to send through the department gifts or monetary support, Christmas cards, things of that nature through you guys for the kids?
I never had a discussion that she could or she could not do that.
Okay, that'd be a no. All right. Okay, so when the kids first came into care, I think Lennox was 4 years old, give or take a couple of months. And you talk about how when Lennox first came into care, she didn't know her numbers very well or her letters, and now she can read and write her numbers. Okay, well, she was 4. I mean, is it an unusual thing that a 4-year-old at that point in time in April of last year would not be up to speed 100% on numbers and letters? And this is a pre-K, or not even pre-K at that point in time. Is that an unusual thing that a 4-year-old wouldn't have all that stuff down already at that age?
It is unusual in my experience that a 4-year-old cannot sing the ABC song.
Okay. And that was April of, that was April of last year. It is now January, 9 months later. Would you not expect 9 months later in time that the child would be more proficient, a 4-year-old would be more proficient with these kinds of things?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, now you testified that you believed it to be in the children's best interest that Mr. Charte's parental rights be terminated, and for the reasons that you set out on the record there. Now, did you ever try to have any kind of input from the children themselves as to what their desires were with respect to termination of their mother's parental rights? At least not. He's 10, 11.
I have heard from Knox what his likes would be.
What are they?
He wants to see his mom.
Okay. All right. When the 2 younger kiddos, Lennox and Memphis, were removed from Mr. Rushford's care, did you ever consider placing these 2 kiddos with big sister, or excuse me, with which one? With Knox, who was with grandma?
Can I object to relevance?
Mr. Duplinsky, how is that relevant?
Well, best interest is on the table. They're looking to terminate my client. They have no permanent solution. Well, let me rephrase. You know what? I'll backtrack. Let me ask you a different.
Mr.
question.
Duplinsky, if you might not have been here, but the children were with the grandmother at one point when this case first started. Then they went to their father, and then they got removed from their father.
Okay.
That option was utilized at some point.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Presuming the court is inclined to grant your request for termination today, what is the department's long-term goal for the 3 kiddos still in care?
We are looking for safe and stable home for them.
Have you reached out to the parents for other viable placement options, relative kinfolk like that?
Yes.
And what have you getting anything?
The ones that were provided stated they are not able to do it. And the one has not been provided to me at this time.
When you say the one, can you identify these individuals? The one who didn't? Who said?
Mrs. Charte talked about her best friend. However, she did not provide me her best friend's phone number.
Okay. If termination is granted, is that an avenue you will follow up on?
Yes.
Okay. And the other option that I got the impression there was a second one.
There is a second one provided to me by Mr. Rushford. It was his parents, and they have stated they are unable to care for the children.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Hardy?
Yes. Regarding the
Now remember that your client is not
right.
being.
I'm gonna limit it because there were some related to my motion that
Okay.
that I was going to ask that I'm not going to now. But regarding the lease, did you ever ask Mr. Rushford why his name was on the lease?
I did not. I just recently received the lease in September, and we have a very adversarial communication with Mr. Rushford, so I have not asked him.
Okay, so you haven't asked him whether he was simply trying to provide shelter for his kids.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Mr. Hardy is testifying. It's also irrelevant to today's.
I'm
And it
not,
was asked and answered, Mr. Hardy.
okay. And you haven't asked Mr. Rushford what kind of child support he had been previously ordered to pay, have you?
Objection.
An objection, Your Honor.
This
Mr.
door has
Hardy?
been open, this door has been open. with
No,
the
he's
lease.
not, he's not on trial. And if you're wanting to amend his plan of service, I don't think those things have anything to do with his plan of service.
Are Memphis and Lennox, are they getting visits with their paternal half siblings?
Objection asked and answered.
It was asked and answered.
It was
Can you
asked and
recall
answered
that?
by it was asked and answered by the placement.
Okay.
Have you set up visits? Have you attempted to set up visits with the paternal half siblings?
Mr. Rushford has not provided me with their information.
When you spoke to the paternal grandparents of Lennox and Memphis, was that at the beginning of the case or was this later on?
I spoke with them at both beginning and later on. Regarding placement was later on.
Okay, after about October 6th, when you were ordered to look into placement with the paternal grandparents?
Yes.
Okay. And the permanency plan of the department is for Lennox and Memphis is family reunification, isn't it?
Not at this time.
In the permanency report you filed on December 20th, your plan was family reunification. Is that
I
correct?
object and ask Mr. Hardy to clarify and tailor his questions to Ms. Asharte, as this is a termination trial for her rights.
Well,
And that's
Your
been
Honor,
established as well.
Your Honor, that is relevant because if the department's plan, at least up until recently, was reunification with Mr. Rushford, then that affects our options as far as whether there's any need for Ms. Asharte's rights to be terminated.
No, it
I
doesn't.
echo that, Your Honor.
No, it doesn't. That
Because
that
there's-
makes absolutely no sense. to say, well, just because we don't terminate one, we shouldn't terminate the other, or because we do terminate one, we should terminate the other. No, that doesn't go hand in hand if they're not together as a couple.
I have no further questions.
Mr. McCormick, do you have any questions for Ms. Whiteley?
No questions regarding this hearing.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, any questions for Ms. Whiteley?
Yes, Judge. Ms. Whiteley, did you ever ask Ms. Charte if she was in a relationship with Mr. Rushford?
Yes,
And what was her response?
no, she doesn't speak to him.
And did you ask her why she was living in a house that was leased to Mr. Rushford?
I did,
And what was her response?
that he was helping her to get into the home at the beginning of the case.
Okay. And do you know whether or not that home she lives in is still leased to him?
The lease I was provided, yes, until March 31st of 2023.
And was her name on the lease as well?
Yes,
Okay. And so this lease would be up in a couple of months?
yes,
Okay. And have you spoken with Ms. Charte about her desires for her children, and specifically for Lennox and Memphis?
yes.
And what are her desires?
She wants her children with her.
And I know that you have gone over, her engagement or lack of engagement of services, but did you and she have a discussion as to what that would entail, having her children returned to her?
Yes,
And did she commit to anything?
she has repeatedly committed to doing anything and everything to get her children back.
And of that anything and everything, what parts of that anything and everything has she completed?
Nothing.
And Ms. Charte is here today asking for her children to be returned to her. And what is preventing the children from being returned to Ms. Charte today?
I'm going to object. The answer calls for a reiteration of everything she's already testified to.
I'm going to agree with that, Ms. Smith. I've heard a lot of testimony today. If you feel like there's something that you think that
I'll
didn't get
pass.
put in there.
I'll move on, Judge. I'll move on, Your Honor. In your opinion, is there still a current and immediate safety for the kids with respect to the kids being returned?
Yes,
Okay. When was the last time Ms. Charte saw the children?
would have been October 8th.
Is that when her visitation was stopped?
It was right before the visitation was stopped.
And when prior to the visitation being stopped, was the last time she saw the children?
That's what I mean, October 8th. The visitation got stopped on October 16th.
Okay. And I was a little not certain. You said that there were 24 visits and she visited 16 times. She missed 8 visits. Did those visits include the virtual visits as well?
Yes,
And were all those visits as to all 3 kids, including Lennox and Memphis?
so all of those visits except for one included Lennox and Memphis. Some of those visits did not include Knox because he was out of state on summer vacation.
Okay. And when the children, you've heard that the children, Lennox and Memphis, both had birthdays. Did Miss Charte communicate with you about the birthdays with respect to having visits or sending gifts or cards or anything like that for them?
During Lennox's 5th birthday was when Miss Charte was having no contact with me. So no, she did not.
And then, of course, we just had Christmas. Did Miss
Yes.
Charte provide you with any Christmas gifts or, cards or ask about the
Objection
children?
asked and answered.
Not about Christmas.
Overruled. I don't recall the Christmas question. I remember the birthday question.
She did not provide me with any gifts. She did send me a very long text that she couldn't believe I wouldn't let her speak to her children on Christmas, and again, how horrible I was. I did not respond.
And of course, you're not allowing her to speak to her kids. Was that based on the court's order?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When did you first meet Lennox and Memphis?
In April.
Where were they living at the time?
They actually got placed with their father, Mr. Rushford, and I
Okay.
did placement paperwork with him and the girls.
And were you able to visit with the kids during that time, up until the time they were placed with the foster mother?
Yes,
Were you aware of any medical issues regarding the girls?
I was aware. I was made aware by Marissa, and I was made aware of a opposite diagnosis by Mr. Rushford.
Okay. And what was your understanding as to what the medical issues were?
So Miss Asharte reported that Lennox had, I don't remember the word she used, but an enlarged intestine, or sorry, an enlarged colon due to the size of her poop. Mr. Rushford reported it was due to what Miss Asharte was feeding Lennox,
Okay.
and that she was lactose intolerant.
And do you know whether or not whether or not Lennox was being seen by a doctor during that time for either the enlarged colon, the her lactose intolerance, or anything else?
So she had been previously seen by a doctor, but it was in May of 2020 or 2021. I would have to look at my notes. I'm sorry. It was a while back.
And okay. Do you know whether or not during that time Lennox was suffering from the issues that were described by the foster mom?
Yes.
Was she being seen at that time by a physician?
No, she was being treated with over-the-counter suppositories.
Okay. Excuse me. And with respect to the issues with her mouth, do you know whether or not those issues were going on before she was placed with the foster mother?
My understanding is yes. They always had a hard time getting her to eat.
Okay. And do you know whether or not she was being seen by a dentist or a physician regarding those issues?
She had not been.
Okay. So it's fair to say that the first time the incontinence was addressed, as well as her teeth issues, was when she was placed with the foster mom.
So I don't have any record of the teeth thing prior to the foster mom. I have record of Lennox being seen by a gastroenterologist for the stomach pooping issues, but her treatment was never followed up on. It was never followed through. The medication was not being provided to her. In this case, Miss Asharte had provided me with a medication that Lennox was supposed to be taking. And when she provided it to me, it was overly expired. So she apparently hadn't been giving it to Lennox at all.
Okay. And to your knowledge, how is Lennox doing medically?
She is
now?
doing phenomenal right now. She still struggles, but she's in big girl panties, and she hasn't had big girl panties this entire time. She feels comfortable in them. She's not embarrassed at school as much anymore.
Okay.
And she seems to be a lot more willing to ask for help to the bathroom now than she was in the beginning of the case.
And then other than describing her, the mother describing that she had, I'm sorry, how did you describe it? That she had a colon issue.
Mhm.
And or it being described that she was lactose intolerant. Did either parent, did Miss Acharta discuss with you in copresis? Did she have any information about that to share with you?
No, she never called it by that. She just kept saying that her colon was enlarged and would need to retract,
Okay,
but she never gave me the name of the diagnosis.
okay. Did she give you the name of the physician the child was seeing at the time?
She provided me the gastroenterologist name halfway through the case.
Okay. Did she discuss with you any treatment the child was receiving?
No, she told me it was going to take as long as it took for her colon to get this big, it would take for it to go back to normal. But she never discussed any type of medicine that was going to help her not have softball-sized poop is what they kept describing to me.
Okay. And then moving on, did you discuss with Ms. Acharte her, the children's positive drug tests?
I did.
And did she have an explanation as to why the children tested positive for methamphetamine? And I'm specifically speaking about Lennox and Memphis.
She told me that there was a person in her home that was working on a fence, and this person was smoking methamphetamines around her children.
And did she explain to you how this person was working on a fence, presumably outside of the house?
That's my understanding, yes.
And she had no further explanation as to what the children would have been doing in such close-up view with this person?
No, she just kept saying, I know that was a bad decision.
Okay. And Mr. Popinski asked you about other placements for the children. Is the department considering the grandparents?
No.
And why is that?
I reached out to the paternal grandparents.
I'm sorry, the maternal grandparents.
Her home study has not been approved, and I do not believe there is room for the girls in her home, nor do I believe she is appropriate
Okay.
to care for the children.
And with respect to the paternal grandparents, what is the issue?
I called them and they are not willing to be placement for the girls. They are willing to support their son, but they are not willing to support the girls.
Okay. And do you know what the desires of the children are? And again, I'm specifically speaking about Memphis and Lennox.
It's very hard for me to answer that question. Memphis is 3 years old, so her desire is Minnie Mouse and watching TV, those kind of things. Lennox would like to see Goff and would like to see Mia and Noxie. However, she has not specifically said to me that she wants to live with her mom or her dad.
And does it appear as if the children are settled in the home in which they now reside?
Yes.
Okay. Are they in school?
Yeah, well, Lennox is, yes.
Okay. And do they have all their medical appointments and dental appointments are being met?
Yes.
Okay. And have they made friends and relationships with extended family members?
Yes.
And until a more permanent placement is established, is it your opinion that, or the department's opinion, that the children should remain where they are?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Pass the witness.
Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be relatively brief. I'm just going to contain my questions to Knox.
Okay.
Ms. Whitley, good afternoon. Good to see you again. I think that you testified that Knox is generally doing well in his current placement with maternal grandmother, and that there is considerable community support surrounding his care. Is that correct?
I testified that he's doing well. I don't know what you mean by the community support, but he is in school and attending youth group. So if that's what you meant, yes.
I actually thought that you used the word community or surrounding support.
I'm sorry, it's because he's been a part of that community. So the school he started, he knew kids already from being his grandmother living there forever.
I understand. Thank you. And as we sit here today, Ms. Acharte is a possessory conservator, but does not have day-to-day responsibility and care of Knox. Would that be correct?
No, she doesn't have possessory conservator. I don't understand.
I think that's a legal term of art, Mr. Baker, that maybe Ms. Whiteley's not familiar with.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
She has not had her rights terminated as of just yet, correct?
Yes, sir.
But she does not have day-to-day responsibility involving Knox. She doesn't take him to school. She doesn't feed him. She doesn't put him to bed.
That's correct.
And I think you mentioned that Knox's desire is to continue seeing his mom, at least on occasion. Would that be fair?
Yes.
So we have a situation where mom currently does not have her rights terminated, but has no specific responsibilities of caring for Knox on a day-to-day basis. What is the difference between that situation and if the judge were to sign an order terminating her rights?
I'm sorry. Can you ask that again?
I certainly will. What is the difference between, as we sit here today, with the term of art that describes Mrs. Charte's current situation, which I would suggest is possessory conservatorship, with no day-to-day responsibility and no rights to access to the child? How is that going to change if the judge signs an order terminating her rights?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I think it calls for a legal conclusion, and it's also irrelevant for the purposes of termination of Ms. Chartay's parental rights.
I'm going to sustain that.
And you mentioned that Knox is placed with his maternal grandmother,
Yes,
but you cannot recommend that the other children be placed with the maternal grandmother.
he was placed there against the department's wishes. It was court ordered by the judge.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anyone else have anything else for Ms. Whiteley?
Just some brief follow-up, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Whiteley, I just want to go back over a couple things. Mr. Poplinski was talking to you about your review of the kids at the beginning of the case and their medical needs. As you got to know these children, did you see anything that led you to believe that mom had not been taking care of their medical needs?
The reports that I was receiving regarding Lennox's issues with the bathroom, I asked for medical records from her pediatrician, and I got the medical records that showed there were not appointments.
Objection. I'm going to object to the content of any medical records.
Sustain.
And I won't rehash it, but the many issues, the expired medication, the not going to the doctor in some time that you discussed with Ms. Smith, were those concerning issues to you regarding the children's medical care?
Yes,
Okay. You were asked about cognitive abilities being jeopardized, and you were asked specifically if you advised that there was a evaluation that said when she started school, Lennox, there would be a delay and she'd need extra assistance perhaps. Were there any delays, and did you put extra assistance in place for Lennox?
I'm going to object. You're talking about a report or testing that was done. It calls for hearsay. The substance of that report has not been admitted. I can't cross-examine it.
Well, the answer does not require hearsay if she answers the question that Ms. House asked. So
Okay.
I'm going to overrule that.
she is receiving extra assistance in school.
Mr. Poplinski talked about the home. Did Miss Chartay live in the home alone?
No.
Okay. Did she have roommates, or was it a boyfriend? What is the situation?
In the beginning of the case, or in the beginning, she had to have roommates move in with her because she can't afford the home without Mr. Rushford paying child support. And the last time I visited the home in November, the roommates had been kicked out and she had her current boyfriend living with her.
Were these roommates, did you have a chance to investigate and see if they were appropriate parties?
I met one, but I did not meet the other one. So I didn't get to investigate them.
Okay. And there's a new boyfriend, is that what you said?
Yes.
Do you know how long he's been in the picture?
My understanding is 2 months. Maybe now it would be 4 if he's still there, but I haven't spoken to her to know that he is there.
Okay. Regarding the refusals to test, you indicated that the judge tells clients if they don't go to a test, it's a presumed positive. Do you also explain that to the parents you who are on your caseload?
Yes.
Is that something that was explained to Ms. Chartay?
Yes.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Would you have advised her of that one time or multiple times?
Multiple times.
Okay. Did Ms. Chartay ever indicate to you she did not understand that?
No.
Okay. You were asked about therapy and canceled appointments. You talked about Ms. Boone. How many therapy sessions did Ms. Chartay actually engage in during the pendency of this case?
I was wrong earlier. She's engaged in 2.
That's 2 sessions from March to now January.
Yes.
Okay. Of the UAs that she completed, how many of those, if you know, did she actually complete on time as requested?
Or
Okay. So just so we're clear, 16 tests were requested.
No, it's clear. I've got it written down. I've been taking notes.
Okay. Of this alleged diagnosis that mom has she provided you any medical documentation or anything to that effect?
no.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Poplinski asked you a lot about what you've done to reach out to Mrs. Chartay and, help her with this, help her with that. How old is Mrs. Chartay?
Objection.
Yeah, let's move along, guys.
In your line of work and you're working through these cases, do you expect a parent to be able to take care of their day-to-day and manage their own business?
Yes, that's what's expected of them, to be able to care for their children.
And based on what you've observed through Mrs. Charte and her compliance with, a simple order or request such as going to get a drug test, do you feel that she's been able to demonstrate she can manage her day-to-day affairs
No,
and care for the children?
no.
Okay, no other questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Piplinski, did you have something else? Just real quick.
Yeah, and I will limit it to what Ms. Smith and Ms. House just recently brought up.
Okay.
You visited the house in November. She had a new boyfriend. You said you never ran his I want to make sure I understood what you said. You weren't given any information, or you never asked for any information.
No, I was given his information and a picture of his Alaska driver's license.
Okay, so he had a name and a date of birth. Did you run him for a criminal history or CPS history?
I have not ran him at this time.
So you can't say one way or the other whether he's a bad guy or not, can you?
Object, I asked about the roommates, not the boyfriend.
It's overruled. Just
I'm sorry, I don't remember saying he was a bad guy.
Okay. All right. Now, the only other thing I want to visit on is this medical stuff. You said you got Lennox's pediatric records. Who'd you get that? Did you have to get them like by subpoena from the provider, or did mom get them to you? How did you come to possess Lennox's pediatric records?
I had to get them from the provider. Mom kept saying she'd get them for me, and she did not.
Did she give you the name of the provider?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. She gave you the name of a gastroenterologist. Did you reach out to the gastroenterologist?
I did.
Did you get records from him as well?
Yes.
Okay. Did what he said jive with what Mr. Charte was telling you?
Regarding
The child's gastroenterological problems.
He's the one that prescribed the medication that she gave to me that was way expired. So
Okay.
she hadn't been following the treatment plan.
I'm going to object it to non-responsive.
overruled. She's responding to your question, Mr. Piplinski.
I understand.
You just don't like the answer.
All right. What was the date of the last time this child saw that gastroenterologist?
I'm sorry, I don't have the date in front of me.
Do you have the records?
I can look them up. I don't have the paper copy in front of me, sir.
Are you suggesting it was from back in 2020?
Yes.
All right. All right, nothing further.
Thank you. Ms. House, do you have any more witnesses?
Just CASA, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll hear CASA at the end. Mr. Piplinski, do you have any witnesses?
I would call mom.
You mean Ms.
Mr.
Marissa
Charte.
Charte?
Yes.
Okay.